It's good to see me, isn't it? It's good to see me, isn't it? It's good to see me, isn't it? Let us rejoice if I that goodness could subdue. I have found the perfect book to cure me of my Wicked movie withdrawals. Oh my gosh, ever since I saw this movie, Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, they ate up this role. Cynthia honestly brought such an amazing fresh look to the iconic story of Wicked. I have actually never seen this play live, and although I've seen commercials on TV advertising for it and the iconic battle cry that always airs at the end of the commercials, I've just never gotten around to seeing it, and I'm so disappointed that I haven't, so I could compare even the Wicked Broadway show to the actual movie that just came out. It is amazing, and I'm having major, and when I mean major, I mean major withdrawals. I've been singing the soundtrack on loop, screaming, belting my lungs out at songs like No One Mourns the Wicked, What Is This Feeling, which might I say is the best song. It's a bop. I love What Is This Feeling? And of course, the iconic Defying Gravity, which just put me all in my feels for so long. It's pretty strange because I'm not like new to Broadway. I watched Dear Evan Hansen live. I've watched Hamilton, my other fave at the top of the list, live. And I've watched The Lion King, you know, the iconic ones, a couple niche ones like Miss Saigon, and a couple plays like To Kill a Mockingbird. But when it came to this, I just never got around to it. And I'm so happy that I was able to experience it at least through this big screen. Waiting an entire year till November of 2025 just to see the second half and see it wrap up is just sending me insane. So just having to deal with that full year of not having any new content but what we already have is just like keeping me so on edge, and I just had to find something to cure this. And I've recently read a book. I found the perfect antidote to this Wicked withdrawal. Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kale and I am a Doctor of Pharmacy candidate documenting both medical and non-medical mysteries on my journey to the PharmD. This video is inspired by The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. The Weight of Blood is a young adult book with a thriller aspect to it, following a cast of characters that live in a community called Springville in the year 2014. And Springville is a community that is very racially charged, despite the more modern time and more recent time of 2014. The characters we follow are Maddie Washington, which is an introverted recluse, Kenny Scott, which is a well-loved jock, and Wendy, the type A personality, among many others within the story. However, I'm going to focus on the first three that I mentioned, Wendy, Kenny, and Maddie, as I feel they connect more and relate more to the three characters in the Wicked movie, Glinda, Fiyero, and Elphaba. I also want to preface this by saying that this book was actually inspired by Stephen King's Carrie. I realized that after reading the author's note, and I was like, oh wait, I kind of see it there too. And then I went and watched a 1976 version of Carrie and appreciated that beautiful movie. Honestly, that isn't really a horror movie in my opinion. I watched that actually crying. But the reason I compare it more to Wicked is because of the author's intentional choice to switch the protagonist that is supposed to be Carrie and create a character that is biracial, adding more of a race aspect to this story that Cynthia also applied when she took the role of Elphaba in Wicked. And although their roles definitely have this fictional type of fantasy sort of aspect to it, it does not go unnoticed that these racially charged charged moments within the story create an extra layer of tension and conversation that surrounds it that I just wanted to touch on because it was so great. And I think I'm going to do a reread of this. I hardly do rereads, by the way. It's so good. I burnt through this book. This cover, I see the Carrie aspect now with the blood covering her. Gorgeous. This is a beautiful cover. This is the part where I'm obviously going to get into spoilers. So if you are interested in reading the book for yourself and seeing all the connections before I touch on it myself, you can do that. And I'll link some sites below where you can get the book. If you just want to see the connections and hear them and you don't really mind, then yeah, let's dive in. Also, like, I kind of went for a more Glinda type of outfit look. I just love Glinda's wardrobe. I mean, come on. Dear Glinda, you are just too good. How do you say it? I don't think I could. She's a terror, she's a tartar, we don't need. The story begins essentially the same way that Wicked does, with a group of people that recall this incident with Maddie, placing blame on her, and we're supposed to believe that she is this sort of villain. They even run a podcast titled Maddie Did It, thrusting us into this narrative that Maddie is somebody that is evil and that there is good cause being so isolated and even hated. Once we start the story though, we figure out that Maddie is an outcast for no other reason than just not being like the others around her. She grew up with a very fanatical father that forces her to straighten her hair, tells her that she should stay out of the sun in any season despite it being winter or summer, and threatens her with violence if she were to reveal to any of her peers that she actually is black or biracial. Through this, we see that she's not allowed to fully embrace or be herself because she is stuck playing the rules of somebody else's game. And I mean, I just love that I can make these little references, like that defying gravity moment in the end. Oh my gosh. However, this plan goes astray when at the beginning of the book during gym class outside, her hair actually gets wet by a sudden storm that she didn't even realize because she checked the weather app 3 times before she went to school and was certain that it wasn't gonna rain, but then the weather was like, yeet, yeah, you tried it. This eventually reveals to everybody when her straightened hair is wet, it immediately puffs up and that they see, oh, she's not white. They already don't like her. This definitely puts her in a more awkward position because now people don't like her for the reason that she lied, essentially. In the aftermath of this, she's bullied constantly by the people in school and they make her life almost unbearable to the point where she does not even want to come to school. But of course, like, she gotta pull up to school because she can't just stay home or, you know, CPS, they gonna be knocking on her door like, oh, yo, where you at? For instance, there's like this scene in the book where after gym class, she's like in the bathroom combing her hair and she's like, man, like, this is not gonna work. And she gets like these rubber bands inside of her book bag and she tries to tame the hair. The rubber bands start popping, so she has no more rubber bands. What am I gonna do? So she contemplates like wanting to run home. By the doors, there's like security and teachers patrolling, obviously, because they don't want kids just leaving the school site. So she's like forced to go to class. Inside class, there's almost like a sudden silence when she walks in. Immediately she feels like a animal at the zoo because people are like gawking at her hair. There's a group of girls and they start throwing pencils in her hair. Among these aggressors, we actually see that Wendy was part of the group. Although she wasn't directly throwing pencils at Maddie, she was kind of laughing along and not stopping the situation. So she definitely had more of like a bystander effect. It's through this that Maddie becomes like so overwhelmed that this burst of power just like emanates from her. In an instant, every desk and chair lifted 4 feet in the air as if snatched up by rope. Wendy gasps at the sensation, similar to that of a carnival ride moments before it plummets back to earth. Then the desk slammed onto the floor, metal legs streaking, windows cracked, and overhead lights burst, raining shards of glass down on the screaming students. The ground bucked beneath Mrs. Morgan, bringing her to her knees. Her head popped up in time to see students grabbing their belongings, running for the door. All except for Maddie, who somehow was in the back corner of the room, curled into a ball. In the Wicked movie, this sort of scene reminds me of when Elfie first arrives at Shiz University. Her sister is wheeled away by a faculty member despite Elfie's protest for her to stop. And she's like, wait, stop. And then like this stuff flies all over the place. Seats and tables fly all over the place and slam everywhere. Grabs Nessa and pulls her back to her. All this power was uncontrolled and it wasn't something that she did voluntarily. And Mrs. Morrible takes credit for it so that Elfie doesn't have this cloud of suspicion surrounding her from the other students that already have this preconceived notion about her. So I thought that was really cool when I saw that in the book as well, that everybody in the vicinity experienced this from Maddie's power, but they chose to ignore it off the pretense of like, oh yeah, it's an earthquake, so there's no way that a person could like do that. I think Maddie portrays a specific strength that Cynthia brought to the movie Wicked when she was playing Elfie. Prior to Cynthia's performance, it was pretty clear that Elfie had like a sad life. She was somebody to almost be pitied, but then when Cynthia, a black woman, came into the story and took the leading role, it almost changed the narrative of what Elfie's story was supposed to be. And I think the same way Maddie being a black girl instead of a white girl off of the pretense of it being inspired by Carrie, it definitely gives it an extra layer to the story. Maddie spends the entire book, both internally and externally, feeling villainized by others just because she was hiding her identity as a biracial girl and using her lighter and fairer skin to pass as white. Her aggressors used this one instance to justify their awful behavior against her because she fooled them for so long, as this obviously contrasts to Elfie's visibly stark green skin. Both of them don't feel safe within their own skin. I want to also touch on the father's portrayals within each of these stories because I feel like these parent figures have such a pivotal role within the development of both of these women. Maddie's father is a very threatening force throughout the book. He's almost like looming around all the time. He's almost like a ticking time bomb because you don't know when he's gonna explode. He wants Maddie to present as white for his own gain because he feels like any tie or connection to her being black would be something that harms him and he wouldn't have this sort of status. That also is reiterated later in the book when we find out the history of how Maddie came to be. He almost wants to hide the relationship that he had with Maddie's mother because of the community that he lives in. Interesting concept as well. Reading this book, obviously, like I'm looking at Maddie's father like, ew, like he is disgusting. He's awful. Then you look at it like he's living in this community, he's acting this way, and it almost challenges you to feel like, why is he acting this way? Although he's in this community, why does he care so much? But we don't really get that intense sort of sit down with his thoughts. He only gets like one POV and it's towards the end of the story. A perfect example of his overbearing and often haughty nature is when he's at home with Maddie. She washes her hair after the rain drenched her, and she is expected to sit by a stove and just be ready to have her hair straightened immediately again, which obviously, you know, as black women, I'm not gonna say everybody knows, but obviously if you straighten your hair every single time, not letting your natural hair get time to breathe, it's gonna start breaking off. We don't really see that part of her hair story, even though there's a huge focus on hair within this story. It's just like she's so used to having her hair straightened, she doesn't even consider even that health aspect. It's both mental, but it's also like physical in a way. But while he is doing this and straightening her hair, he intentionally quizzes her about random historical facts, whether it's science, history, whatever. He would ask her questions while he's straightening her hair, and if she were to get a question wrong, he would burn her with the comb, like the nape of her neck, the back of her ear. As black girls getting our hair straightened, obviously, we know when that happens, it's usually an accident. It is an accident. What am I saying usually for? And we're supposed to like hold our ear back and all this stuff. It's more of like a threat. Like if she were to not answer this question correctly, she would get burned with that comb. In the confrontation about her hair, the scene begins when her father is very abrasive with her off of the past events of her racial status being revealed to her whole class, or school actually, because now even the faculty know. How? He spat. How could you be so careless? So stupid. How? Maddie twisted her fingers together. I'm sorry, Papa. He prowled toward her. What is the one thing I ask of you? Every day, what do I ask? To check the weather, she mumbled to the floor, tears welling. How many times are you supposed to check? 3 times, she sniffed, paralyzed with fear. I did, Papa, I checked. It didn't say anything about... He closed the distance between them in 3 swift steps and backhanded her into the wall. Don't you lie to me, he roared, standing over her. You didn't check. You couldn't possibly have checked. He yanked her up by the hair, dragging her to the hallway mirror. Look at yourself. You're a mess. A disgusting mess. That was honestly a tough reread just right there. I really appreciate that the author centralized the story around sunlight and water being Maddie's metaphorical weakness. In the movie of Wicked, Elphaba's weakness is water, and that's gonna be unfortunately her demise in the end, as we know from The Wizard of Oz. Black women in general. The conversation that surrounds our hair in the workplace and environment and communities, it is so great that this author showed this important side of what women face around our beauty, around our hair, things that are so important to our self-esteem and to our character and to essentially our culture. Both Elfie and Maddie feel this need to please their fathers despite the terrible treatment. And even in the end, when they fully embrace who they are, they still have this need to appease to their father or honor their father in some way. One thing I didn't like in the movie was how sort of picky Nessa was with her sister.
Better talk to her before I do, because I'm hurt her feelings.
It's just so interesting seeing those dynamics of like, oh, this person is their family, so they care about them, even though they're treating them awfully. Another important factor in Maddie's development is the closet that she has in her home. Basically, when she gets in trouble or when her father wants her to focus in on her whiteness or her white side and delete her black side, he makes her go into this closet that's plastered with faces of white women with blonde hair and blue eyes. He tells her to pray to be more like them. White women in various shades of blonde, brunette, and red, and tea-length dresses at cocktail parties, and aprons serving roasted chicken to their husbands. In old Hollywood movie posters, Papa had even gone so far as to paste eyes in the collage. Blue eyes, all staring down at Maddie and her frizzy mane. Real beauties, their hair styled perfectly, milky skin immaculate, everything she could never be. There was a moment that I caught in the Wicked movie when Elfie was singing about meeting the wizard. It was in the Wizard and I song. She mentioned something about wanting to remove her skin to be more like other people. In fact, it's one of the main reasons she wanted to go to the Emerald City to meet the wizard for her skin. However, in the end, she realizes that she would use her visit to help the animals. The lyrics in the song Wizard of I read as this: no father is not proud of you, no sister acts ashamed, and all of Oz has to love you. When by the wizard you're acclaimed, and this gift or this curse I have inside, maybe at last I'll know why, when we are hand in hand, the wizard and I. And one day he'll say to me, Elphaba, a girl who is so superior, shouldn't a girl who's so good inside have a matching exterior? And since folks here to an absurd degree seem fixated on your verdigris, would it be alright by you if I degreenify you? Of course, that's not important to me. Alright, why not? I'll reply.
Pendy Prince on
Wendy. We need to talk. She's like the it girl of The Weight of Blood. Literally the embodiment of Glinda. Wendy and Glinda both try to perform good in their own way, but when it comes to the marginalized group that they're trying to help, it sort of manifests in a way that is not ideal to that group. Wendy in the story is Kenny's girlfriend, and it's important to note that this is an interracial relationship, with Wendy being white and Kenny being black. She follows the popular crowd and wants to gain favor with those in her group, but also wants to be viewed as lovable and good for college admissions and even the media. Her type A personality focuses more on being the lead organizer for events or being the ideal person that you go to if you need help. She builds this exterior of wanting to be referenced as the ideal good person. She often does this by building a life that focuses on her good deeds, keeping her personal life private, and keeping her star-studded athlete boyfriend Kenny close to her at all times in hopes of marrying him and just living off of the status that he would bring her. In fact, one of the ways that Wendy does this to try and be the good person is when a hate crime is performed at school against Maddie by one of the girls or her best friend in the group, Jules. It was an event where people had to dress up for Halloween, and Jules, a white girl, dressed up as Maddie, a black girl. So you can make the connection there or what that hate crime was.
What do you mean by that?
it was recorded and posted online where several colleges saw it, even media outlets, resulting in Jules, the friend that did this act, getting rejected from her admissions. The ones she was already accepted to, they pulled their admissions. A lot of attention was on Springville High School. Wendy saw this perfect opportunity to jump on it and control the narrative. Wendy decides that it will be beneficial for Maddie to join into school events, this being senior year, and basically wants to give her an opportunity to join prom by allowing Kenny to take Maddie instead of her. She knew she would be questioned by those in her group as to why she would let another girl take her guy to prom, but she was so focused and fixated on being the one that did this, sort of like the savior of the whole situation, that she didn't even regard that as a serious thing. She just wanted to be that person that fixed the situation or gave the outcast that avenue to participate in something after a hate crime was performed against her. Maddie had to go to prom for optics and needed to appear like they were one big happy family and that she in turn had forgiven them. But Maddie couldn't go with just anyone, and definitely not alone. The new black girl had to go to the all-together prom with a black guy to further drive home the point that all the black kids were happy at Springville High. Maddie needed a Cinderella-style night, and there was only one guy Wendy could think of who would be the perfect prince. Wendy remained very still, eyes focused on the blanket, trying not to lose her nerve, hoping she'd played her hand right. "It'll be good for your image," she insisted, nuzzling his shoulder. The star quarterback, 5-star recruit, takes the town's reject to the first all-together prom. No one will forget it. They'll write about it in the paper, and then people will see that we're nice people. Glinda plays into the same image idolizer. She strategizes oftentimes and even manipulates certain situations into making it seem like she is this great, perfect princess that everyone should adore because she made a sacrifice or she was the one that stepped up for a person in time of need. She often uses her acceptable image for her self-serving agenda. For example, when Glinda and Elphaba first meet, she visibly is shocked and even audibly streaks is crazy when she sees Elphaba and her green skin, and a lot of the people there do as well, and she immediately kind of like snaps and is like, I think I could be shown as the great person here. And she gives this big speech of like, oh, if you ever need help with your problem, for your situation, I can help you. Everybody immediately claps like, yes, girl, yes, queen, you ate with that line. When in reality, it's like, girl, what are you talking about? In the same way that Wendy offered help for Maddie's isolation and her want to include her in the prom, Glinda does the same thing when she measures the optics around Elfie's arrival and offers help for her problem. And even though I viewed her intention with Elphaba in the Ozda's ball to be genuine when she stepped up to her after hurting her with the whole hat thing and had some sort of actual love start to bloom there and resentment for what she did for hurting her, I can't help just like getting this idea that at the back of her mind, she was sort of like, this is a great moment too for me to not only fix the situation, but also be viewed as others, as I was the one that stepped up and did this interesting dance with Elphaba, showed her kindness in this situation too. It essentially furthered her image with Elfie as the savior. Also, not to mention Glinda's intentional pursuit of Fiyero throughout the movie. She mentioned to Elphaba at the train station before her departure to Emerald City that she was concerned about Fiyero's actions because he was thinking. Imagine saying that about your partner, like, oh my gosh, they're so different because they're thinking. She viewed this as like a threat to their relationship, which, by the way, I don't even know how that was a relationship because I don't recall him ever asking Glinda to be his girl. But anyways, they were booed up in the classroom and all that stuff. So she was concerned about this because initially when they met, he had this iconic song, Dancing Through Life. It basically allowed them to connect on their shallow and surface level personalities. She loved how nonchalant he was and how he didn't really focus on trying to be confrontational. She was worried about all that she had planned for them because they connected on this one thing. And even prior, when she mentioned to Elfie that they had plans to be married without her even speaking to him about these plans to be married. She's just like, oh yeah, we're gonna be married, but he doesn't know yet. Even that, like, she controlled the situation in the narrative there, where Fiyero didn't even get a chance to pop the question. She's just like, yeah, he is going to marry me. I'm going to be his wife, and this is the image that we're gonna have. We're gonna be the picture perfect, acceptable beauty type of couple. And in the story, Wendy mirrors this when she decides to switch her college that she actually had a full ride scholarship to attend Kenny's college that he was going to for pro football, just so that she can continue to live a life with him and gain all the status that would be when she is with a football player. He would be secure both financially and status wise. She didn't have to fight for anything for her own. She just had to show up. But little did she know, in all her planning and scheming, is that when she asked Kenny to ask Maddie to the prom, little did she know that Kenny would end up connecting with Maddie better than he connects with her, which is the same way that Elfie and Fiyero connected, especially when they were in the woods after saving the cub from the classroom. You want to watch a movie tonight? My parents will be home so I can skip curfew. Wendy gripped Kenny's hand as they strolled down the hall. He shrugged, giving her a fake smile. Yeah, sounds good, babe. Wendy ignored the panic tugging the back of her brain. She couldn't catch a good read on his mood. They used to be so in sync, but the closer they sailed toward graduation, the further he seemed to drift. Maybe he's nervous about us going to different schools, she thought, wondering if she could tell him about her change of plan. Another incident is when the popular kids are at a house party and one of the girls directly asks Wendy how she feels about Kenny taking another girl to prom. I can't believe you two are really going through with this, Kaylee said from the sofa. Wendy shrugged. Well, I wasn't going to prom anyway. And after everything that happened, Kenny just wanted to do the right thing. That was her carefully crafted answer. In truth, it killed her to give up prom, but she hoped her orchestrated efforts would pay off big further down the road, where it really mattered. And it seemed to be working. Everyone commended her on being a selfless person, giving up prom for the less fortunate. She had received a ton of interview requests and hoped she could parlay the opportunities into possible summer internship where she could forge even more connections to help Kenny when he entered the league. And even in Glinda's most iconic song, Popular, her line, helping people less fortunate than I, and let's face it, who's not less fortunate than I, the acts that both Wendy and Glinda make are considerate, but it's never for just the act itself. It's always for a self-serving, image-building purpose. And whether it's consciously or subconsciously, they want their good deeds to be linked to them so that others can see it and they can receive credit for it in some way. I don't know what happens in part 2, as I mentioned before. I have this inkling, this feeling that Fiyero is going to be sort of the catalyst that changes the dynamic between Elfie and Glinda, which is so sad because friendship is the best relationships you could ever have. I feel like that's gonna change the dynamic between them and create this sort of rift that divides and probably terminates their relationship. Kenny is the final character that I want to cover, as he is actually the main catalyst for this story. Kenny starts off the book as being the only black guy in his friend group, and he is complicit with a lot of the things that his friend group says and does, all for the sake of trying to be nonchalant, exactly like Fiyero, dancing through life. And he just wants to get to that goal without stressing or being confrontational to the things that are so blatantly being done against him or towards others. Although there were such obvious microaggressions made against him, he didn't apply any merit to it, as he was in a committed relationship with Wendy. He just didn't want to mess that up. His character development is strikingly different from Maddie's, as Maddie is a biracial girl that was covering her identity to fit in until it was obviously revealed by the rain, whereas Kenny is a dark-skinned male, and his blatant ignorance to the racism that he faced at the expense of his friend group was what made him comfortable. One of the closest comparisons out of the three I would have to say is Kenny and Fiyero. In the Wicked book, Fiyero is described as being ochre in color, which is the color of turmeric. So he was portrayed as a person of color the same way that Elfie was. He also had blue diamond facial markings that he was ridiculed for. I honestly think this original description of Fiyero makes his connection with Elfie much more hard-hitting and personable, and I'm really upset that they made that change for the movie. As I mentioned before, Kenny traverses his way through life with little attention as possible. He even tries to portray the facade of a generic jock when he actually loves reading and is quite intelligent and even wants to major in English in college. There's a scene in the book where he has a very uncomfortable interaction with his English professor over a recent assignment that he submitted. His professor accuses him of getting help from his girlfriend, Wendy. Mr. Bernstein walked through the rows of seats, handing back the quarterly book analysis assignment. He placed an A- paper on Kenny's desk and tapped it twice. "Need to see you right after class about this," he said. Heads turned in Kenny's direction, all wearing the same "uh-oh, someone's in trouble" expression. Kenny grinned at the gazes as if it was no big deal, but felt his organs harden. Had he answered the right question, added the bibliography, numbered the footnotes? He slyly peeked over at Jason's desk, his paper sitting face up, C-, the same as his last two papers. So why hadn't he been asked to stay after class? The bell rang and Kenny waited for the class to clear out before he stepped up to his English teacher's desk. "What's up?" he said, his voice light and airy. Mr. Bernstein nodded at the report. "Did you get some help with that?" Kenny handed him back the paper. "No. Why? Did I do something wrong?" No, it's great. Incredibly insightful." Kenny frowned at the minus symbol sitting next to his grade. "Thanks, Mr. Bernstein. But it's the third one like it that you've done. Not saying your work wasn't good before, but this sudden improvement is, or to someone else, could be perceived as, well, a little inconceivable. I know you have a ton on your plate, so maybe did Wendy perhaps help you write it? I'll be okay with it if you're just honest with me, son." Kenny gripped the strap of his book bag, careful not to react to the burning lump of coal in his throat. He'd stayed up half the night finishing that paper, put in more effort than necessary, only because the book interested him. So he gave his English teacher exactly what he wanted. "You know, you're right, Mr. Bernstein," Kenny said, the lie burning his lips. "I asked Wendy to read a draft and she helped me polish it up." Mr. Bernstein nodded. "That's what I thought. No worries, son. We all could use a little help now and then. I'm sure you won't have any issues in college. They'll have plenty of people to help you with your schoolwork." There was an undercurrent to his words. He didn't mean help you. He meant do it for you. Kenny chuckled, his toothy smile straining. "You right. Thanks, Mr. Bernstein. I appreciate the tip." Fiyero was introduced as the airhead character that took life's circumstances at face value. In his lyrics Dancing Through Life, he states, "They want you to become less callow, less shallow, but I say, why invite stress in? Stop studying strife and learn to live the unexamined life. Dancing through life, skimming the surface, gliding where turf is smooth. Life's more painless for the brainless. Why think too hard when it's so soothing, dancing through life?" He didn't believe in stressing, and although the undercurrent of his message is great, and to an extent I can agree with it, but he took it to an extreme, and it wasn't until he was alone with Elphaba and she confronted him about this that he really saw that there was more to life than just accepting things at face value. Elfie wanted to prove to Fiyero that he was more than just a good-looking stud that didn't care about things. He proved it when they were with the cub in the forest. He confronts him and says, "You could have left back there," when she allowed him to be the only one still awake after she casted the spell with the flowers and put everyone to sleep. And she was like to him, "You could have left back there." And he's like, "Yeah, I could have. But he was here helping the cause." Maddie has a similar revelation with Kenny when he wants to get to know her better when he takes her out for smoothies, and she's able to connect with him as another marginalized member, but she also challenges him with deeper conversations that he does not have with Wendy. Kenny rubbed his face, holding back a smirk. "Okay, yeah, I'm going to the University of Alabama." She nibbled on her straw. "Is that a good school? Is that a good—" "Oh, now I know you're playing with me," he laughed. "Yes, it's a very good school. The top school. Well, at least for football." She gripped her cup. What will you major in?" "Does it matter?" he scoffed. Her eyebrows pinched. "But you're more than just football, right?" Kenny looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time, and a certain serenity melted into him. English, he said with a small smile. There's also a scene with Wendy and Kenny after that interaction with Maddie. He starts realizing that there's more to just surface level relationships and surface level conversations and exteriors. Wendy has sat in the corner of the weight room cheering him on. Her cleanliness felt suffocating at times, but he also felt like a total a-hole for thinking that. Guys would kill to have a girlfriend like her. So why couldn't he stop thinking about Maddie? Ever since their trip to Dairy Queen, he had been replaying their conversation on a loop. He liked knowing how sharp her tongue could be, the way she checked him about his cursing, and how she wasn't giving him the answers that she thought he wanted to hear. On the surface, she seemed rather jittery, insecure, and criminally out of touch. But he also recognized something very deep, a spark, a longing. She didn't need saving or changing. She could handle the world on her own. He felt in on her little secret. And in a town like theirs, he usually didn't have the luxury of secrets, not with everyone watching his every move. A career in football meant resigning himself to interacting with an endless number of yes men, fake people, and leeches. But what he didn't realize until those milkshakes was how much he craved connection with someone who he could be his entire self around without his guard up. Someone who knew nothing about him before they'd even met. Someone just like him, estranged from their own race, forced to pretend. Someone like Maddie. Both of the arcs that these leading men went through over the course of this story introduced them to a new way of life that challenges what they thought was so secure and so true to what got them through life. It introduces an awakening for one that was asleep for so long. The main theme for these stories are identity and how each character needs to craft a specific one just to get accepted and get far with others. I think the reason that the Oz Does Ballroom scene was so impactful for many people, including me, it's just so hard seeing somebody tackle loneliness and just have to deal with that isolation. It's horrifying and it's sad. No matter if you're in Glinda's, Elfie's, or Fiero's position, it happens to successfully manifest itself in a different way each time. That is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed making it, and I definitely enjoyed reading this beautiful, when I say beautiful, this gorgeous book, okay? And check the back too. Like, what? I enjoy reading this and it thrusting me into a world that just reminded me so much of Wicked, wanting to see that movie over and over. So addicting, that movie. I don't know what it is. Tell me what your favorite moments within the movie was. I'm gonna say 2 of them because I want to go for like the book and the movie. I would say the most enjoyable part of this book was being in Maddie's head and having her like navigate her telekinesis powers, and low-key like having her own defying gravity moment at the end, although albeit it's a bit different and more bloodier as the cover shows than Elfie's. But I just loved being in her headspace and just having her deal and grapple with her emotions. In the movie, I would say my favorite part is at the end when Elfie fully succumbs to her powers and she like tosses her cape and it like flips around and the camera pans in slowly. That was iconic for me. I just like love that scene. And it's also like her own toss moment, because of that whole scene in Popular where, you know, Glinda's telling her how to flip her hair like a moron. It's like, you girl, you don't even need to do that. But when she did it, it made sense and it had merit to it and it just had power to it. Like, she flipped that cape to be like, yeah, okay, this is the cape with this outfit, with this broom, with this hat. This is fully me. And I really enjoyed seeing that moment too. Maddie and Elfie, my faves, go hand in hand. And then I'll be like probably Kenny and Fiero, and then Glinda and Wendy at the bottom. I would say Maddie and Elfie is the ones that I connect with most. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. You can also follow me on my Instagram, Kale Esprit, if you want to keep up with me there. And I do post like a lot of my book reviews from Goodreads on there as well. As I say, be sure to smile more, appreciate life more, and I'll see you guys next time.